The wreckage of World War II is not its only legacy. Battleships, artillery, bombs, and tanks. They weren't the only equipment used in the war. Most combat fronts resulted in sex slavery for women. Here is one of the most brutal tales from World War II: the comfort women. Japan's history of abuse, denials, censorship, and suppression. At the beginning of the 20th century, Japan progressively cemented its dominance over East Asia, including Taiwan, Korea, and Manchuria. Asia was at war continuously from the Second Sino-Japanese War's commencement in 1937 until World War II, which included this region. The Japanese Imperial Army implemented and maintained the comfort women system during the era of ongoing hostilities between the early 1930s and 1945. In Shanghai, the first comfort station opened its doors in 1932. In the beginning, Japanese prostitutes who had traveled voluntarily filled the comfort stations. However, as the Japanese army maintained its military buildup beginning in the late 1930s, it turned to the locals in occupied countries like China, Taiwan, and Korea to force women into performing sex labor in these stations. The Japanese military started using local or Japanese brokers to recruit women in 1938, especially in Korea and Taiwan. These agents would frequently travel between cities to recruit 40 to 50 young females at once. They would send the women to China and other battle zones once they had enough. Instead of the labor and income that the majority of the women expected, they were duped and kidnapped into sexual slavery. Women suffered from sexually transmitted diseases, were beaten, and were frequently sexually assaulted at the comfort station. Those who made it through the military detention recounted the treatment they received from the Japanese soldiers and station doctors as terrible. In addition to the army and government of Japan offering sexual services to commanders and soldiers, prostitution already existed in that country. The establishment of the comfort stations had 4 basic justifications, according to Japanese military records. One objective of the institution was to prevent rape by Japanese soldiers. It was essential to develop a system that would stop Japanese soldiers from raping locals. Before these stations were built, China questioned the military over the multiple instances of rape by Japanese soldiers that had angered the villagers. The Japanese Expeditionary Force commander in China gave the order to build facilities for sexual pleasure right away in order to placate the Chinese. Although the method was designed to reduce rape crimes, it instead had the opposite effect of increasing rapes by arousing soldiers' sexual desire. Due to the continuous sexual abuse of the women brought into the comfort stations, the concept of these facilities did not deter rape. Another aim of this program was to reduce the spread of sexually transmitted illnesses. Given that the facilities would be managed by the military and that troops would frequent the neighborhood brothels where sexually transmitted diseases are typically contracted, it was believed that the sexually transmitted infections may be avoided. However, the spread of venereal diseases could not be stopped. Even the military doctors who made sure the ladies and soldiers were in good health. As the Japanese military grew throughout time, it could be claimed that the prevalence of sexually transmitted illnesses decreased while the number of persons affected with the diseases increased. The belief that an infected soldier was dishonorable may have contributed to their spread because soldiers kept it a secret from one another. The rapid proliferation throughout the comfort stations is assumed to have been caused by this. Despite the comfort station system's failure to achieve the 2 aforementioned objectives, it was maintained so that the ladies could satisfy the needs of the angry troops who fought on the front lines. The men received comfort from the women, which helped them cope with the stress of being frustrated and exposed to hostile environments on the battlefield. The 4th objective was that the Japanese government started the comfort station as a last resort to stop the leakage of military secrets. The risk of information being exchanged with the women with whom the troops may have developed intimate relationships would exist if they had visited brothels other than the military-controlled comfort stations. Soldiers, however, were unable to do so at the comfort stations that were managed and watched over by the military. Therefore, the comfort women system's implementation avoided these concerns and did not need to be concerned about civilians disseminating private information. Former comfort station employees have spoken out since the 1990s to recount what truly transpired while comfort stations were in operation. The survivors expressed feelings of anguish and rage. Ladies in Korea who claimed to have been former comfort women sued the Japanese government in 1991. Asian women have kept mute for 50 years since they were unable to discuss their sexuality in public. Only 30% of almost 200,000 women and girls who were imprisoned, according to the UN, survived. They were frightened and in pain from the way the Japanese soldiers treated them. The survivors are fighting for awareness of this problem and for the rejection of all forms of trafficking. These women's experiences speak for numerous additional victims, both dead and alive. The comfort women and their horrific life is a tragic tale of the war that is still being debated.